Hey everybody, Mike Kwan here, and I am here to talk about natural astrology, how it is different than common astrology, whether that be Western or Vedic, and why it matters. So let's jump on in. Natural astrology, first and foremost, is a practice. It is an action. I practice natural astrology in two primary ways. One is I'm very conscious and purposeful of setting up my own day timer and planners based upon the phases of the moon. And that is done not so much, it's done primarily for a reason of getting my rhythm with time outside of paradigm calendar system, arbitrary calendar system, and linking it to something which is knowable and observable, if for the only purpose of bringing my consciousness outside of like paradigm. And then the other way which I practice it is the starboard. And let's see if I can get it right here. This here is the starboard, and you could see these discs around the edge of this top wheel, and those discs are just where each disc has a planetary symbol on it. It's where the planets are right now. And at each phase of the moon, full, last quarter, new, and first quarter, I will do the appropriate movements of each planet. And so that process in doing that, it is in integration with how I manage like my events, like what I do with my time through the date book, which I was just making reference to. But more importantly, the movements of the planets in the sky, their orbit, I guess you could call it, and like how it changes over a 7 or 8 day period, that becomes something which I'm aware of, if only just from moving these pieces. And what that does is it brings a knowledge of these heavenly movements, which we are all underneath all the time, and it's putting it into my nervous system in the most like literal, natural sense. The second piece of natural astrology is it is an approach to the heavens that is focused upon integration and not interpretation. And so the reason for understanding a chart, understanding the heavens, it isn't necessarily to like solve anything or to know anything as much as it is to integrate, to become more a part of. And what is it that natural astrology is attempting to integrate with, but that of the natural rhythms and movements in life as symbolized and literally occurring by the movements of the heavenly bodies. Now this is in contrast with the rhythms and movements of life as defined within paradigm or culture. Paradigm and culture have their own natural rhythms. That being the next day starts at midnight, the 7-day week, holidays, the Super Bowl, those are all markers of the unfolding of life. And as an individual, unconsciously and understandably why, they integrate their lives and therefore their consciousness with those rhythms, well, then they are becoming part of and supporting paradigm. Paradigm exists within something else. That is, paradigm is an idea. It's a concept, first and foremost, and it happens underneath the heavens, just as everything happens. And when consciousness is integrated with paradigm, one sees reality through the lens of paradigm, and it supports paradigm. And paradigm only exists through conscious support. So it does whatever it can to keep itself alive, which is also to keep the individuals that feed paradigm feeding it and separate from reality. And I'll define reality in this moment as at least being understood and represented by the natural movements in which we're experiencing life within. Natural astrology is more mystical than astronomy, but it's more grounded than traditional astrology. This here is a typical astrological chart. And natural astrology is not so interested in what this means, but what this is. The practice of natural astrology is supported by a non-dualistic perspective. And what I mean by that is, or the dualism which I'm referring to, is this idea that whether it be me or you or anyone else is a completely separate individual. I mean, on a certain level we are, right? I have my body, you have your body, you have your life, I have my life. But it's not so much about the dualism with other people. It's about how how the individual experience is part of some whole, some totality that, maybe we're all a fractal of the totality, but then at the same time, an individual separate piece. And the non-dualistic perspective is an understanding that separateness is an illusion. So when I made reference to the integration, it is the purposeful integration in consciousness, the reminder that though we experience life from an individual perspective, we are also part of the totality or the whole of it. And that's what the non-dualistic perspective is. And this is an act of rebellion of paradigm, which is a message that you are on your own and you are by yourself, and the only thing you can integrate with is the paradigm itself. A non-dualistic perspective is more or less the teachings of many maybe ancient approaches or philosophies from across different cultures. They all kind of had maybe different flavors of the same idea of being able to meet life or reality as it is. And that is done by being present in the here and now in order to have a spontaneity with life. What is the life that the spontaneity, the dynamic between you as an individual and you as part of life, what is that spontaneity, or how is that created, or how is that cultivated? Well, that is cultivated by the integration. That's what this is about. It is this recognition through understanding the heavens and the movements and your unique natal chart, or the placement of the heavenly bodies at the moment of your birth, that is a key, not necessarily the key that this will explain what and whom you are, but this is your point of reference. And so by moving out of a dualistic perspective, which common astrology really supports, is understanding one's life through their astrology and being able to see oneself through their astrology, which is Babylonian. Natural astrology is using the very same things which cultural astrology uses to keep you separate, but using it as a means to integrate. And the integration occurs through consciousness. This is a consciousness-driven experience, and particularly rational consciousness, so specific thinking. That's what I mean by rational consciousness. And by linking that rational consciousness, whatever you're putting your attention to, whatever you're spending your time with, there is a link which is being created between that seemingly separate thing and your internal thing. And then that is the loom in which life is experienced. And when that happens within paradigm, and when that happens within a dualistic perspective, well, then it is a dualistic experience. When taking a natural astrology approach to the heavens, you are using the rational mind to understand what is going on, to be able to read something like this. But the purpose is not to figure anything out, to interpret, but to integrate so that the spontaneity with life can happen. Natural astrology is a cleansing from and a reorientation away from paradigm matrix hypnosis. We're all in a state of hypnosis. We each were born into this culture, and as our consciousness began to take shape, as it does for the human being, it takes shape in the environment it is forming in. And whatever that environment is, that will become the basis of understanding reality. And so this means that paradigm matrix values and perspectives were the perspectives in which we were all ingrained into understanding reality. That's just the nature of how all paradigms work, all cultures work. It's not necessarily a problem or a fault in how the human development works, but it's an understanding of it. And so as an individual becomes mature, as an individual becomes knowledgeable of their inner world and the relationship between the inner world and the outer world, and what the outer world is actually about, and how paradigm is separate from something else. When one is able to take this rational consciousness outside of paradigm and link it into something which is real and knowable, there is a reorientation and a cleansing from all that has said otherwise. So, I mean, this is just how it works. Watching the news changes how someone perceives reality, and then they experience reality based upon how they're perceiving it. That is how it works. And if this knowledge is not taken into application, well, then, you know, it works. It's still going to work. And so by keeping conscious mind inside of paradigm, well, you're going to begin to have a paradigm perspective, and you're going to see all of reality that way, and you're going to act out that way. I mean, this is truly what projection is. I think we understand projection in terms of like a psychological thing where a story or something that exists in one's shadow, meaning that they're not aware that they're holding a belief, and then they project that belief outside of themselves. The very thing which they're holding, they're projecting onto someone else or some other event. Like, that is a concept which I think is well understood by most people now. That's not limited to just psychology. That's just how consciousness works. And when there is a shadow, meaning there is a part of awareness that we're unaware of, we are projecting it out. By fueling the unconscious with these stories of paradigm, one projects out those truths, and they see them wherever they go and act accordingly, and then that magnetizes that exact same thing into being, becoming proof that all of this is real. You become what you worship. The principle we become like what we worship is a fundamental one to spiritual life and has a positive side. Being increasingly transformed into the image of the Lord. Like, this is told from maybe a biblical perspective, and that's, that is part of the irony of paradigm, considering how much of our religions are actually further supporting this, the separation in which they are meant to, or supposedly, to collapse. But this is speaking of the truth. It's speaking of this truth, which is like where you put your attention is what you will become like. And specifically, when you kneel before worldly practices that don't elevate you, well, then you're lessened by the experience. Natural astrology isn't about worshiping planets. It's not about worshiping really anything. It's about becoming conscious and present to the environment in which we are having our life experience, this mystery of being alive, linked to a body with ground beneath the feet and sky above the head. What all this means, no one knows. There's certainly people that have beliefs, but no one knows, the bigger picture. And what we can know is how the workings of this realm and this experience, and what we can see is that where we're putting our attention, we become. So to be able to take your attention outside of the stories of paradigm, but link it into something which is larger and knowable and observable and objective, well, then that is the practice. The first step in natural astrology is seeing the astro chart as a literal map. This is a map. To the majority of human beings right now, if they were to see this, perhaps some might know that this is astrological, but only a small percentage would be able to interpret this, to be able to say that, you know, the moon here is in Virgo and Uranus here is in Taurus, and the ascendant is right here and the midheaven's right there, and they'll be able to tell you what that means, and these red lines are squares and these blue lines are trines, you know, they'll be able to explain that. But it has been my experience, both in my path as an astrologer, but then also in talking to other astrologers, that this just remains an abstract concept in most people's minds who can read this and have no idea what this literally is. Natural astrology is going to that, what it literally is. This astro chart is of November 8th, 2023 at 6:15 a.m. at St. Petersburg, Florida. That's where I was on November 8th, 6:15 a.m. in St. Peters, Florida. And I took this picture. What is this picture? This is the moon. This is the Venus. And you could see right here, the sun is rising. That's all right here, right in front of you. Let me explain. So imagine you're sitting on a hilltop somewhere where you have a full 360-degree vista, and you're facing south. Assuming you're north of the equator, if you're facing south, what you'll be able to do, if you stayed there all day, even before sunrise, you'd be able to see the sun rise and reach its highest point in the sky, and you'll see the sun set. And let's say you are doing this in the time of the lunar cycle where the moon rises right when the sun sets. That's at the full moon. And you'll see that the moon basically rises in the same general location as the sun, and it follows a very similar path where it rises to a peak and then sets to the west. In fact, all of the heavenly bodies, all of the planets, they follow this same line, which is visible when you're facing south, and the east is to your left, and the west is to the right. That's what all of this is. So let me show you in maybe a more clear way. So I took this same chart, and I drew a line across from this AC to, usually the DC is there, it's implied, that's what this black arrow is. This stands for ascendant and descendant. The ascendant is always in every astro chart located right here at the 9 o'clock position. The descendant is always at the 3 o'clock position. That never changes. This MC, the midheaven, this could shift a little bit, but this never changes. And what is this? What literally is this? But this is where the sun crosses the eastern horizon. That is this point. This is the ascendant. Doesn't matter what time of day. It doesn't matter what time of year. It doesn't matter if any planets are in this location in the sky. This is the ascendant. This is the descendant. The line in between is this horizon. When you see this green line, this is the horizon. This is you sitting on that hill, sitting on this peak right here looking out. And I took away all of the visual noise, all of the confusing elements, and just left what we can actually see right here. The moon and Venus, and just beneath the eastern horizon is the sun. That's where we find it. Sun is right here. Venus is right here. Moon is right here. Sun is getting ready to rise. Moon is right. We can see Venus right there. And this makes sense. Why does it make sense? It's 6:15 in the morning. Of course the sun is getting ready to rise. Beginning to approach astrology from understanding what is happening, as opposed to necessarily what it means, is the first step in natural astrology. This is an integration and an alignment to what is occurring. This is an abstract and is a separation from actual reality. The second lesson of natural astrology is to recognize that signs don't matter. We can deconstruct tropical and sidereal placements. We can see right here that this is the same chart, November 8th at 6:15 a.m. in St. Petersburg, Florida. And this is what's called the Western or the tropical placement. Here we see the same thing in November 8th, 6:15 a.m., St. Petersburg. And this is the sidereal placement. Half the astrology world follows this. Half the astrology world follows this. We can go and see that the moon and Venus, and moon and Venus are in the same place. We could see the sun is beneath the horizon. We could see everything else is in the exact same places. Why? Because that is an actual reality truth. But when you look at the signs, which we see that these heavenly bodies are in, we'll see that they're different. And certainly there's a reason why. And there are arguments, from two sides of the camp as to why one makes more sense than the other, just as the different sides of the Abrahamic religions will go and argue with each other while their particular contradictory story of the same concept is the right one. But we could see that it changes. And so because of that, we can begin to realize that signs don't matter, because whether you call this location of the moon right here, whether you call the moon in Virgo, as the Western astrologers would call this, or whether you say the moon is in Leo, as the sidereal astrologers will tell you that, it doesn't matter. The truth and the reality is they're right here. You can use signs. I use signs to know where everything is relative to each other, but I'm not ascribing meaning to it. And you could even go further. What is a fairly common progression you'll see, at least within Western astrology, is that someone might learn about tropical astrology, and then they'll find out that sidereal astrology is quote-unquote more accurate. And there's some truth to that, but you could then go and look at what's called real sky astrology. And what real sky astrology says is that these constellations, which are shown to be of equal distribution of 30 degrees of arc, well, that's not exactly how it is in reality. If you were to go and actually look at the constellations and look at the sizes, well, they vary. Aries is only 18 degrees in size, and Taurus is almost twice as big as it. And then in this particular website, they include Orion onto the ecliptic, onto the zodiac as the 14th sign, Ophiuchus being the 13th sign between Scorpio and Sagittarius. And this is arguably more accurate. This is a more accurate description than sidereal. So now sidereal, you're going to be left by saying, well, then what I thought, what my sign was in sidereal, that's not right either. Well, this one is the right one. But if you're really being honest, You got to go and say that each and every one of these constellations that makes up the ecliptic, they're arbitrary. Why is Aries, the part of the sky that you're saying Aries, which is identified by the stars that make up Aries? Well, suppose you decide to look at different stars, like the stars that, a few stars from Aries and a few stars from Taurus, and you come up with your own astrology, your own zodiac. It's arbitrary. All that is real and knowable is that, yes, I can use the stars as a backdrop to understand the placements and the movements, but what's real is what I can see. No matter what you call this, the moon is here and Venus is here. What I will say is important is that if you are going to understand the heavens, you do need a point of reference. Like having the zodiac and having the constellations is immensely helpful because it gives you your bearings as to where everything is. It's just recognizing that the bearings are relatively relative. So I'm gonna end this piece on natural astrology right now. There's, this is just like the beginning of perhaps a little bit of the why and the what is natural astrology. But at the end of the day, natural astrology is a way of being in this mystery with an actual understanding of the rhythms that are happening for the purpose of becoming more connected with reality and less connected with paradigm. I'll probably make some more of these videos because, one, I did a whole bunch of slides and I'm not going to go into them right now. I think that this is enough. And I also want to go and highlight some events which are coming up, which are natural astrology based. On December 1st, I'm recording this on November 9th, I'll be doing a Starboard ceremony in West Palm Beach. And that's going to also include a bit of a workshop, which is going to be more explanation as to what exactly natural astrology is and being able to demystify and understand more or less how common astrology has been used through hypnotic anchors to introduce these archetypes into the heavens for people to understand life. But that will be covered, and then that will be followed with a Starboard ceremony where we will go through the action of building the chart of the moment in which we're doing this, what the skies look like on December 1st, and that's in West Palm Beach, Florida. And also, I'm going to begin to offer an online natural astrology class. I'm going to keep this small and it's limited to 7 participants. I think I have 4 people right now who are already signed up, and these are going to be 5 one-hour classes done via Zoom. And starting in late November, the actual details, I'm going to work out once all of the people are in there, but that's going to be $120. And so I want to open that up for anyone who is interested in actually learning what this is all about so you can begin to do a practice. I also offer natural astrology tutoring, which are just one-on-one sessions where we discuss this directly. And then lastly, I've begun to do Starboard personal sessions again. And those are all done. I record the session and then I send you the recording. If you're interested in any of these, you can order it and find more details at this Linktree address, or you could always just send me an email. So with that being said, thank you for your attention, and I hope to hear from some of you. Take good care.